Okay.
Hello and welcome to Romance Writers Therapy. I am Marty B, and I am here with Lauren Connolly, who is going to give us her brain to help us understand how to manage time, because Kate and I were talking about this and we're like, we are not the heroes of this hour. So thank you for being here, Lauren. How are you?
I am doing great. I'm excited to talk about time management because I am very much a stickler for this.
I have seen some of your charts and how you break down the year, and also seen what you produce in a year, and it's very clear that you understand how time moves and how to make the most out of it. And that is just, I think that is such a skill. From the other side of it being what is time? What an incredible skill to have.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, what you said, the what is time, I think that's a really good question for everyone to ask themselves because I actually think that the answer is different for everyone. It's really important
Uh-huh.
to define what time is for you because, if you have an hour to write and I have an hour to write, we're going to produce different content, different amounts, different everything. And so, that's the first thing that I had to figure out when I wanted to start managing my time was what can I even do in a certain amount of time? Because
Mm-hmm.
when I used to write while also having a full-time job, and then I moved into writing full-time, and everyone I think thinks oh, well, if I write this much in an hour when I'm working full-time, then I'm going to have 8 hours in a day. I'm going to make 8 times as much content, and that doesn't happen. At least for me, maybe someone else could do that, but it's kind of it's figuring
I've
out.
never heard of that happening.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
honestly, I probably watch more YouTube distracting videos now that I've got all this free time, or not free time, but time that I have to
Yeah.
schedule for myself. But yeah, I think that's one of the first important things for time management is figuring out what time means for you individually.
I really like that concept of understanding your own um output before you start creating goals for yourself, essentially, right?
Yeah, yeah. And
I think that is the best way to work forward.
yeah, and I think that so when someone's interested in really managing their time, my recommendation is always experiment a lot in the beginning. Something that I did
Mhm.
when I was because I studied writing in college, and it was very uh literary focused, and so
Mhm.
when I graduated and I went on to get my librarian's degree, I actually didn't write for years, which was a bummer because I kind of had this idea that
Mhm.
if I wanted to be a writer, I had to write literary stuff, and that bored me, and so I wasn't really interested in writing. And then when I realized I wanted to start writing romance, I was like, oh, awesome, I'm enjoying this. Now I need to figure out
Uh-huh.
how to actually incorporate this into my life. And so back then I was working full time, and I found a group. It was the 5 minute authors, and the concept was basically you just say that you're going to write 5 minutes a day because everyone can find 5 minutes in their day to write. And what I
Yeah, that's lovely.
yeah, and what I found was I was like, oh, cool. I know how many words I can get in 5 minutes. Awesome. And now I know that I can find 5 minutes in my schedule. And oh, now I know that I can find 15, 20, 30 minutes in my schedule. And so
Uh-huh.
it was kind of and then I was like, oh, how does 5 minutes in the morning versus 5 minutes in the evening versus 5 minutes on my lunch break? It was a really low key, not high pressure time management thing that helped me figure out. I'm an afternoon writer. That's something I figured out that I do the best after lunch when I have a cup of coffee. Other people, they're 5 a.m. That's when I get my words, and other people are right before bed.
Yeah.
And so that too, like having a low pressure way to experiment with, again, figuring out what does time mean to you. That was a really good thing that I recommend people do. And like, I don't write every day anymore, but in the beginning I did, just to figure out what days work best for me too.
I love that advice. I used to write in 5-minute pockets all of the time. Like, just, the kids were eating, and so I would just like sit at the kitchen counter and write for 5 minutes. And like, I could pick out 5-minute time frames kind of throughout the day. And it worked out really well, but also then my brain was kind of being pulled in multiple directions. And so when I was able to start focusing and sitting and giving writing like all of my focus, it made it harder to do those 5-minute moments, right?
Yeah.
But lately, I have been really struggling. Like, I have my time set aside, I sit down, and then like I can't make myself put words down, right? Like, the critical part of my mind is just too loud.
Yeah.
And so I'm like very much avoiding the work. And so I'm wondering if I should go back to like, 5-minute pockets here and there. And that might relieve some pressure, because it's just 5 minutes. Like, it's fine. Whatever happens, happens. And like, if I delete 5 minutes worth of work, like, it doesn't feel as committed, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing that I think I had, like a similar revelation that I had that really helped me get words on the page was getting comfortable with writing bad words. Like I would sit down and be like, I'm
struggling with that.
Yeah, I was like, I'm going to write complete crap. This is going to be like, she walked into the room, she was sad. But at least it's like words on the page. And I think, when you have, you're like, it's just 5 minutes. Okay, whatever. I'll just put down whatever I can, because you don't have brainstorming time. You're like, all I have is writing time, so I will just write. And I think that sometimes I think that mindset, so like being willing to write something that's not great, really helps get over writer's block. And I do think that those smaller segments of time kind of force you into that mind frame. So that's a good point.
Yeah. Okay, well, goodness. All right. I'm so excited now.
Yeah.
I've been struggling so much, Lauren.
Well, I hope this
okay. Oh my gosh. I'm really looking forward to setting a 5-minute timer and expecting that from me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
and I think also like something that I've found helpful when doing like any task or like changing anything about my schedule or what I'm working on is like thinking about what my goal is, like on the grand scheme and like on a smaller scheme. And so like if someone is writing just as a hobby, just because it like brings them joy and stuff, I wouldn't time manage at all. Like no more than making sure that you have time in your day to do something that brings you joy. Like I like reading for fun. And so I try to make sure that I have some time before bed to read a book. But I wouldn't be like, okay, you have to read for 2 hours a day at this specific time. But then if you're like trying to make your writing a side hustle, then like, I would say you start trying to have some time management. But again, if it's a side hustle, then it's going to be a lower priority versus other things in your life. But then if your goal is to write full time and have like a full-time salary off your writing, then you need to keep in mind that kind of like once you figure out how you perform best and like how your time works for you, then you will need to start thinking, okay, like how can I commit a full-time amount to my writing? And again, you're not going to do that the same way as everyone else. Like I work a pretty regular work schedule. I think I do Monday through Friday, and in those days I'll do about 40 hours of both writing business and then writing. And so that's kind of, it's like building blocks. And but you shouldn't like put full-time writer pressure on you if you're doing it as a hobby, because then you'll lose the joy of it. So it's kind of like finding that balance based on what your goal is.
Well, and I think that it's also hard because writing has been a hobby in the past. And I have rearranged like what I want from it, right?
Yeah.
And like the goal was always to produce books and publish and stuff like that, but like I approached it at a different level. And now that like I am approaching it at a more serious level and have for a couple years now, it's like I think that's part of the block, right?
Yeah.
Is
yeah, and that's why
is that the experience isn't the same as it when there was no pressure on it.
Oh yeah,
right?
Definitely. There's like I think back to my earlier books that I was writing before like I had an agent or a contract or anything, and I was like, I spent a lot of time on those books. But also I think so. This is also going to be different for different authors. But like personally, I have a lot of ideas for books, and so I like the fact that I have figured out the fastest. I have figured out the fastest way for me to produce a quality book. That's not like I don't make it in a week. There are authors who can like write a book in like 1 to 2 weeks, and I'm like, kudos to you. Like I know that is never going to be a speed that I'm writing at, and I'm okay with that. But like after doing all this experimenting, I've figured out like, okay, this is a reasonable expectation of time for me to produce a book. And I'm like, okay, now that I've found the fastest way to produce a quality book, I know like how many of my stories I'm going to be able to get to in a year. And I know how to plan for this. And it's that I find very like comforting. And like in the beginning, I was like, oh, I've got all these stories I want to work on. And I would get very scatterbrained about it. And I would like stop in the middle of a project to work on something else. And now I'm like, you can work on that. You'll just work on it at this time period. Look, you've blocked it off on your schedule. So you don't have to like be worried that you won't get that book. You can do it. It's just going to be a little bit later. And so that's like, I find time management comforting to me in that way, because it like lets me know like, oh, as long as you don't like die in a fiery car crash, you'll be able to write this many books in your life or something. Not to get morbid, but
as long as there's no untimely demise. Like.
Exactly.
I can see that too, because ideas are not. I come up with ideas very easily, right?
Yeah.
But it is like there's a bit of like, how am I going to do all of these things? And then it's hard to like be like, well, all the ideas that I currently feel very much burning inside of me, it's going to take at least 4 years to produce those, right? And then in between there, I'm going to come up with like little novellas I want to write and like stuff like that. And everything needs time.
Yep.
And so it is like, as a fairly impatient person, it's hard to like accept that like 4 years is a reasonable timeline, right?
Yeah. But then 4 years go by really fast in some other ways, and you're like, oh my God. But yeah, you were saying.
Well, and it's still better to have
go for it.
Finished work than it is to like be like trying to do everything and never getting anything done.
Yeah, that's something that it actually like when I first moved from my full-time library job into full-time writing, the first few months, I think I was working on like 3 projects a week. I was like, oh, okay, Monday and Tuesday, I'll work on this book. And then Wednesday, Thursday, I'll work on this one. And then Friday, I'll do this fun project. And it was just like my brain couldn't switch that much. That was another thing I figured out about myself. I was like, because I'm doing kind of a traditional work week and I've got my weekend, I can transition between projects each week. So I think about I plan out my whole year on a weekly basis. And I use what's called a Gantt chart. and it's like a project
Mm-hmm.
management chart. Like anyone could go and Google Gantt chart, and I always forget if it's Gantt or Gantt, but it's like Gantt or something. But basically,
Yeah.
yeah. So what, like on the x-axis up top, I have every week in the year, and on the y-axis down the side, I have the projects that I think I will probably work on that year, and then I've color coded what the different parts of writing a book. So I've got green for writing time, and I know that for me, I can write a very, very rough draft in about 6 weeks. And so I'm like, okay, if I'm writing this book, then I need to make sure I've got 6 green weeks for it. And then I need like 4 weeks for editing, and that's blue. And so like I have that all mapped out. I map it out like October of the year before. And it's a flexible thing. The great thing about using that chart is that when new things pop up, I know everything that needs to be moved around, and like I know what needs to get shifted. And also I'll also like block off vacation and holiday weeks. So I'm like, don't do anything, don't expect to get work done in those weeks. And and I also like, so I recently, or in the past year, I got a book deal with Berkeley, which was super exciting. And
oh my gosh, so exciting. Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm super pumped for that book to come out.
Yeah, you should be. Very exciting.
But one of the things that the editor asked was because I've got a catalog of books basically proving that I'm capable of writing a full book, we were able to sell to Berkeley with a proposal. So I just had the first 3 chapters.
Oh, that's amazing.
And yeah, and then a synopsis, and like that was great, except then I had to write the book. And so she asked, when do you think that you can get this to me? And because I had that Gantt chart, I was able to go in there and like look at what time I had available to write it, and I was able to give her a very specific date, and she said that sounds good to me. And so it like gave me confidence in negotiating timelines with other people, and so that's another way that I find mapping out my year helpful.
That is so cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And I also think
I'm just curious.
Yes.
Can I ask, was it the chapters that I beta read for you?
I'm trying to think. Was it I forget what chapters I sent you.
If you want to talk about this when we're not recording, we can do that.
No, we could definitely talk about it. What chapters did I send you?
Okay.
I've like sent so many things out.
So it's okay if I just mention like a couple things that are
go for it
present? Okay. So it was young college age, and he was a swimmer, and she was surly.
No, so that one, no one has offered to pay me money for that book yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you.
So
yeah.
I wouldn't have been surprised if that was the one that was on contract.
That was, yeah, I forget what I named that. It was like In Hot Water or something. Yeah, I had a whole idea for, like 4 new adult college swim team books. And, yeah, and no one picked them up. It's so weird in the publishing world, like the traditional publishing world, when it comes to like new adult in college. They're like very hesitant about that. So, like, it does phenomenally in the self-published world, but I was like, I've got too much on my self-published plate already, so I can't write these books unless someone is offering me a contract on them. So, yeah, the one that's coming out, it's actually it's a contemporary, like, mid-20s to late 20s kind of age people, and it's called P.S. I Hate You, and it's basically like a riff off of P.S. I Love You, but brothers best friends, enemies to lovers. I'm pumped.
I'm so excited. That's awesome, dude. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. And yeah, see, that's another thing.
Yeah, I'm really surprised. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so that's another thing that, like, if one of the things that you want to do is sell books to publishers, or like try to sell books to publishers, there might be times that you're allotting a slot of time in your schedule to write like the first 3 chapters of a book that goes nowhere. Because that is not the first proposal. Those chapters that I sent you, that was probably like the 3rd book that I had written a full synopsis and the first 3 chapters for, and my agent took it out and she was like, they like your voice, but the story's not working for them for whatever reason. And so that's another thing that you kind of gotta, if that's a route that you're interested in taking, the like traditionally published route, trying to pursue one of those contracts, you got to get comfortable with sometimes you've given time to a project that is not going to go anywhere.
Well, I think even like in the indie publishing like arena, like you hear a lot of people talking about how they started a series and there's like a core group of fans for it, but it's really not earning, and so they switch to the other series that is earning. And like sometimes you just got to put your eggs in the basket that's making more eggs, So and so I think even like in the self-publishing arena, it's still important to know that like sometimes your time is not going to be like equated into like dollars and cents, right?
Yeah. And I think also like because there are like a decent amount of authors who can write very fast and write good books very fast, that some readers have like gotten into the expectation of like, okay, where's the next book? And you're like, I'm just trying to manage my time. And so like I've gotten a decent amount of people that are like, okay, when is such and such book happening? I was like, I just gave you the last book. Give me a moment, please.
Do you know it takes a lot longer for me to write them than it does for you to read them?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my goodness. I mean, but that's a great problem to have.
Yeah.
To have readers that are like knocking on your door, like, hey, want to give you more money. Like, I want more book. So That's awesome.
Yes, it is. It's very nice to know that like a project I'm working on will be enthusiastically received. But then it's also
that's gorgeous.
That starts like, shifting you into that headspace of, oh, I got to make sure that this book is good. And I like got to remind myself, like, no, you can write a very crappy first draft. Make this a horrible, horrible first draft as long as you get the drafts on the page.
I love that. Yeah, because like that's actually something that Kate and I have been talking about a lot is how having like readers then creates pressure, right?
Yeah.
And and like we discussed, like it's a great problem to have, but also it is still a problem, right?
Yeah.
Like there are still like different like emotional and mental aspects that go into having expectations.
Yeah, I mean like there's no pre-order date for the 3rd book in the 4th Wing series, probably because Rebecca Yarros is like, oh my God, everyone's watching me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like George R.R. Martin, he still hasn't like gotten the next whatever. But like, yeah, I think everyone at like every stage feels that like pressure to write a perfect book for different reasons. And so, I've like got to continually remind myself that I can write shitty things and then just fix it in editing.
How long, and this is obviously only applicable to you, but like, how long does your editing process take if you have a 6-week draft? And also, how long is your 6-week draft? Like, how many words?
Okay, so breaking it down word-wise, and again, this is like, these are numbers that I've figured out through experimentation. I can consistently, and this is also like, I figured out word counts that I can write consistently, because there are definitely days where I've like hit it out of the park and like written 5,000 words, but I know that that's not a daily thing. So I don't set expectations off of my best days. I set my expectations off of my like, oh yeah, you've done this repeatedly days. So, I write in the afternoons, and I can consistently get 3,000 words in an afternoon of writing. And so I'm like, okay, if I'm writing
Okay.
5 days a week, then that's 15,000 words. And so then in 6 weeks, that's 90,000 words. And so I don't always write 90,000 word books. Like maybe I write a book that I can pretty well predict around how much a book is going to be, because I'm a plotter, and so I'll outline it, and based off of how many scenes I think is going to be in the book, I can do a rough estimate for how long I think the book is going to be. But if the book is going to, if I think the book's going to be about 75,000 words, I still give myself 6 weeks, because I'm like, well, what if something happens, or like, what if I have a slow week, or what if the book ends up being a little bit longer?
Yeah.
And so I build buffers in. And so, 6 weeks, I can usually get about 90,000 words. And then I give myself 4 weeks for editing. And the way that I have figured out works for me editing-wise is I take 2 of those weeks to slowly read through the rough draft and, like, fix it up as I'm going through it. And then and I'm taking notes, too, for, like, large changes I should make. So I've got, like, fixing it as I go, and then notes for changes I should make. And so in that 3rd week, I go back and I implement all those notes. And then in the 4th week, I have Word read it to me, and then I pick up a lot of things that way.
Okay.
And so by the end of that, I have a polished draft that I can send to either my editor that I pay for if I'm self-publishing, or my agent if she's going to shop it, or my editor at I work with small publishers too, and then also so I would say, but I also usually I don't butt those up against each other. Like I don't go 6 weeks of writing and then 4 weeks of editing, like 10 weeks straight on a book. I usually give like I work on another project for a couple weeks in between them to like let myself forget
let it rest.
Yeah. And I don't have a great memory, so I do forget a lot of what I wrote, which is nice, actually.
Yeah, that's great. I do tend to have like a really solid memory, but like I don't reread books because like I tend to really retain them as I'm reading the first time through. But even I come across scenes and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot I wrote this. Right. Or like I'll see a line. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was me.
Yes. And it's really nice when it's a good line. You're like, oh my gosh, good job, me.
Yeah. It's great when it's a good line. Like, oh my God, look at me be so clever. It's not always a good line.
Yeah. Sometimes you're like, oh my God.
But I am going to try. Yeah, but like that's the whole point of like just let yourself write crappy words, right?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna try to do a better job of that.
Yeah, and I don't know. That's another thing.
It's so hard.
Like again, in the beginning of when I did this full time, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have all this time. I'm only gonna give myself 2 weeks for editing, and then I needed 2 more weeks than that, and so my whole schedule is getting shifted around. And so now I know, like, okay, you do a very, very rough draft. And so you need more editing time, and that's fine. Just plan for it. And so it's back to experimenting with what time means for you and what you can hit consistently.
Yeah. Okay, so the Gantz. Now I get so much energy from like planning.
Yeah.
But like I lose my planner, right? Like I forget to like continue to check back on it. And so it's like this beautiful plan that I spent time on, and then like after like 2 or 3 weeks, like I'm completely forgetting that plan even exists. So is there like something that you have that continues to remind you of like where you're supposed to be at on your schedule, or does your brain just remember?
Oh, no, like that's why I have the Gantt chart, is because I would totally forget everything. And so basically, so what I do in like I said, like October, I'll sit down and it'll be like my morning project where I will do that Gantt chart. I will outline what I think I'll be working on for the next year. And then sometimes if I'm like, oh, I know that I'm going to be writing this book for the next few weeks, I won't look at the Gantt chart for like a month because I don't need to because I know what I'm working on. But like as I'm approaching the end of writing a project, I'll be like, okay, what was I going to be working on next? And I'll go into the Gantt chart and be like, oh yeah, I wanted to like spend next week outlining such and such book. And then like maybe I'll see something and be like, oh, I need to move that around. And so the Gantt chart is like a reference thing that I have it. I've actually like made my own in Google Sheets, and so it's in my Google folder. So sometimes I'll pop in there like on a weekly basis to look at it, and sometimes I'll go weeks without looking at it. And I also like I use it as a planner, but I also will use it as a tracker because if it ends up that like I didn't need 6 weeks to write a book, then I will change the color in that little section to whatever I ended up working on. So I have an idea. That was how I like figured out like, oh, you're consistently spending 4 weeks editing as opposed to 2 weeks. And so that like it helped me in the beginning figure out what my habits were. And so there's that. And then I also have a whiteboard where I love checklists. I do like a daily checklist that I write out in the morning for tasks. And then I have a monthly checklist that I have up on a whiteboard that has like my big projects. And so I'll like look at the Gantt chart and be like, okay, what am I working on writing wise? What do I need to get done this month? And then I'll also have like all the business tasks that I want to complete. And so the Gantt chart is only for my writing projects. Like I don't have any other type of projects on there. And I work on other projects like business wise, like, newsletter. Like I do a newsletter every month, but I'm not going to put the newsletter into my Gantt chart because I do all my business stuff in the morning and I do my writing in the afternoon. So it's kind of like the Gantt chart is what am I doing in my afternoon? And so there's that too. It's like I think that for me it's a different mindset. It's like the business mindset and the creative mindset. And so I kind of needed to figure out when in my day, what times of my day was I feeling creative and what times was I feeling like more business focused. And I realized I was like, I can't start my day without checking my email. Like if I need to know if someone sent me an email that I need to respond to. And so I was like, well, I can't check my email and then go and start writing a book. And so that was another thing that I switched up. I was like, oh, I'm going to write in the mornings and do business in the afternoon. I was like, no, this needs to change. I need to do business in the morning, writing in the afternoon. And so, so that's how I manage my time. I've got the Gantt chart for the whole year. I've got a whiteboard checklist for the month. And then I've got a little, bullet journal for my daily checklist. Cause I get like a little buzz of, endorphins when I get to check off a task. I'm like, good job, Lauren. You checked that little box.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
I've been trying to do like rolling tasks like in my calendar. So like my life in my calendar is broken up into like the different hats I wear, right? Okay. So I have real estate that has like the task I need to get done, right? Yeah. And like the task list grows, it shrinks, like all that stuff. And then, whatever I get done in a day, like I mark off. And in real estate's different because it's not a lot of repeating tasks, but like writing has like a couple repeating tasks that I want to get done in a week, right?
Yeah.
And so like I check it off, and when I'm done with today, like when I'm no longer focused on writing, I just reschedule all that entire block of time into the next day, right? Okay. So that I'm able to see like, okay, I got these things done yesterday. I have to do this today, or like 1 or 2 tasks on here. Like I'm never expecting myself to do all of it because it is meant to grow and shrink based on what I need to do for the rest of the week or the week coming up. And so I can see that I'm being productive in the places I need to be productive, but there's no hard deadline on anything.
Yeah.
And the things that I'm having, like the writing is the thing I'm having the hardest time doing in the writing segment right now. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
And
like
yeah.
it's an individual thing. It's kind of like you need to ask yourself like, what makes me finish something? Like what makes me do it?
Yeah.
And so like that's gonna be
Well,
different.
and then also
Yeah.
Sorry, it's just also like my life keeps on finding different patterns, right? So like my
Yeah.
kids go to school now, which is amazing. But, you know, Ash is at school Monday through Thursday. And so Friday is kind of like it's just typically like mom Ash day, right? Like
Yeah.
he never really got that one-on-one time that I would have liked for him to have because of the pandemic. And so I really try to make sure he's getting that one-on-one time on our Fridays, especially since come next year, he's going to be Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
But okay, so August, we have the school year time frame, and I can like get into a rhythm somewhere around late August, early September. Like I found myself in a rhythm. And then November hit and we have the holiday season now and I'm completely off rhythm. And then getting the kids back into school, I found a rhythm again. And then we've switched buildings for my office and now I'm finding a rhythm again.
Yeah.
And then it's going to be May in June soon and I'm going to be out of school again. And it's like, okay, so then I have to refine my rhythm for the summer. And so it's really hard to like know what I can do when there's so many different like variables.
Yeah.
But at the same rate, I don't want to not make this a priority because it's mine, right? It's like the one thing in my life that is mine.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to find that balance.
Yeah.
I love your advice of like tracking.
Yeah.
And I think another thing that like I need to take from your advice is like you are able to structure your time and your day in this way. And I will have to find more flexibility throughout the year, right? And so like under scheduling myself to make sure that I'm able to do that.
Yeah, and I think actually like so I think about my year pretty consistently because like I don't have kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like I just have my dog and my cat, and like when they have medical issues,
well,
that's when I have to worry about them.
You've built a foundation that this is your career, right? Which is like I find that really admirable, and so yes, you get to look at the year and know that it's going to be pretty consistent, that you get to like build your time, but you also made that happen for yourself. And like, that's no hard feat. And it's something that you decided to not walk away from. And I'm sure there were opportunities where that didn't sound like a bad plan. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? Like,
yeah.
I'm sure there were struggles like along the way that like you just kept with it. So,
but actually,
so I don't like, oh, go ahead.
Like, well, what I would say is a potential way for you to think of it is actually like, so how I approach writing is not at all how I approach librarianship because I was working at a college. And so, it was an academic schedule. And so it was like fall and spring, I'm going to be teaching. I'm going to be interacting with students. I'm not going to be like doing any type of big project. But it was like, okay, summer is big project time. Like summer was my downtime when I could like do big things. And so that is also a potential way that you could view writing. I know. So I actually just, I went to a signing, Catherine Center. She's a big author. And she was telling us readers about how she's a one book a year author, and she likes that, and it works for her. And she approaches her book in a very seasonal way, in that like during I forget how she broke it down, but like during a certain season she's just doing research. Like she is just getting all the information that she needs. And then during another season, she writes the book. And then during another season, she edits it. And she like bases that off of, I think, what works for her. But that's also something that you could take into account, is not so much like trying to make it consistent across the board, because like your life's not going to be consistent across the board. It could be like, okay, I want to do like quick 5-minute writing sprints during the summer, and then also, you know, watch YouTube videos that help me with my research, or like really get a solid outline of the book down, because I can do that quick bursts while my kids are playing or something. And then like when they go to school and you can like maybe get more time to yourself, like think of it that, like, I'm not saying that you have to do that, but that's also another way that some authors do it. They think of writing a book as a seasonal thing, as opposed to like a 40-hour work week. All weeks are going to be the same type thing. So.
That's a very good point. Yeah. That like instead of looking at the year from January to December, I could look at it from like in those chunks, like what I just described, like August to late November, and like what is my goal in this time, right? Is it to get a full rough draft, or is it to get like what could I accomplish in that time? And then just know that like there's going to be a pause button hit as like school breaks are coming in.
Yeah. And like
stuff like that. Yeah.
And that like that is more like making goals achievable is one of the best ways to like stick with anything. 'Cause yeah, like when you're like, I didn't do all that I wanted to do. Can I even do this? That like disappointment is wearing on it.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, time works differently for everyone.
Well, and like something else that you're clearly capable of is like achieving your goals by a deadline, right?
Yeah.
So last year I had quite a few deadlines that kind of really made me struggle, right? And now this year, like I have one deadline for October 1st, and I'm like, get it done now, because I don't ever want to be like close to a deadline again, right? And so I put my other project on hold, and I'm doing this right now because the deadline pressure really, it made me produce, but I also like it just put so much pressure on my brain, and I just kept on trying to complete this deadline as my brain was like, you need to rest. And so I know I'm on the other side of that, where I'm having a hard time writing because my brain is still like, that didn't feel good. Yeah. Like, it did not feel good what you did to us last year, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Is that something you can kind of speak to? Have you had that experience too? Or have you been able to structure your time in a way that, like, you haven't, burnt yourself out?
Yeah, there's definitely, there's been times when I've gotten like way closer to a deadline than I wanted to. In those times, that's when I really worry that even during the editing process, I am not fixing the book enough. Because like that's when the pressure comes. I definitely, I feel like it happens less now because I have figured out how to structure my schedule. And it's also, so basically what happened, for me was, like I had paid for editing services and like to happen at a certain time. And I like, overestimated how many words I could get done or something. It was in the beginning of when I went full time, and I was like, it was like full steam ahead. And so now I've figured out like, okay, well, I'm not going to schedule with my editor until I have the draft done and I've done a read through, because that's how oh yeah, what was happening was I hadn't given, that was back when I was like only giving myself 2 weeks to edit a book and I needed 4. And so I was like,
yeah,
that was what was stressing me out. And like I didn't,
that is so much pressure.
yeah. And so it was definitely something that I needed to figure out. And it was like build more buffers into your schedule. And so that's what I do now is that like I overestimate the time that I'm going to need for a project. Not to the point that like, I'm like, oh, I need a whole year to write this book. But like I said, like if I think I'll probably get it done in 5 weeks, I'll still give myself 6 weeks. And I'm like, if I need 6 weeks, then awesome, that's what I have. And then I'm like, oh, if I only needed 5 weeks, then I have a bonus week. This is awesome. What am I going to do with my little bonus week? And I thought that this week was going to be a bonus week, and then I ended up getting sick. And so I was like, okay, the bonus week is that I can just sit on the couch and watch K-dramas while I try not to throw up. And so that's
no fun.
Yes.
Well, I'm so glad you had your bonus week.
Yeah. And so that's what, again, that's what the experimenting until you find out like what you can reasonably produce in a certain amount of time. And so when I have deadlines set by, so now I'm like, okay, I try to be really easy on myself with the deadlines that I set for myself. But when it comes to deadlines set by others, like publishers and whatnot, I put that in my Gantt chart, and then I work backwards from it. And I'm like, okay, if let's say the deadline is here, I'm going to pretend like I need to have it done 2 weeks before this. Okay, if I need to have it done 2 weeks before this, then I need to have my 4 weeks of editing built out, and then I need to have my 6 weeks of writing, but I'm going to have a little time in between those. And so there's that helps. And then I've also, and I know that not everyone can do this, but I'm like, okay, something that I can do to like jumpstart my writing is I will sometimes take myself on a solo writing retreat where I will like book an Airbnb for like 2 or 3 days, and all I will do is write. And it's not my hands hurt by the end of that, so it's not something that I do regularly. But I'm like, if I start getting stressed about the amount of words that I need to produce, or like maybe a book is turning out to be a lot longer than I thought it was, I was like, okay, well, you know how you can get like 20,000 words in 2 days is by paying for an Airbnb and just like not having your dog bark every 5 seconds when you're trying to write. So that's also something to like consider. Again, in the experimentation, it's like what is a way that like when is the time that you have way surpassed your normal goal? Was it like, oh, I went to this one coffee shop and it was so good, and like I just got so many words? And then maybe you could just be like if you're in a partner and kids situation, be like, hey, partner, could you take care of the kids for just a few hours this afternoon? I'm just going to go to this coffee shop and I'm going to like kick this manuscript ass just for a bit. Like that's something.
Well, and
too.
I think again, like a really good, like when I break down this advice to like its molecular level, like it's find your personal hack.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, you know, your personal hack is like, I'm just going to go in the middle of the woods and have nothing but this on my mind.
Yeah.
And like that is going to be different for everybody, but I still, again, like I think that's great advice.
Yeah. And like some people, the way it would be like having a writing sprint with a friend and be like, hey, can you and I just like have a series of 15-minute writing sprints for like 2 hours where we just like bang this out. And like some people would do really well with that, having like I have to text you how many words I got in 15 minutes for like these 2 hours. And that would probably like really help some people. And some people just do that on like a daily basis. They have a partner that they're like, at the end of the day, I have to text them how many words I got in that day. And some people would be like, oh, sorry, bummer, I got 0 words. And it like wouldn't really affect them. But other people would be like, there is no way that I am texting them a 0. So I don't care if I get 15 words, I'm writing them right now. And then I will text them 15. And so there's that too. It's kind of like, again, the back to like what gets you to do something is something else that
just knowing yourself. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, then it kind of it reminds me a lot of like Becca Symes and like the Clifton Strengths, right?
Yeah.
And kind of like using that as like a roadmap of like knowing how to kind of like crack into your own personal code.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like it doesn't have to be Clifton strengths by any means. It's just like that is like the conversation that's still happening in the writing world a lot.
Yeah.
Is people appreciating that knowledge.
Yeah, and like knowing how you interact with your writing, what motivates you, what stops you up, and yeah, my big thing is just experimenting with a lot of different methods, and then like you don't have to like track every single thing you do, but at least like making note of the times that you've had like a really good writing session, and noticing if there's any patterns in it that can really help figure things out for you.
I love that. Yeah, I love that. So we're kind of getting to the tail end here. Okay. Is there anything in particular that like you want to talk about, or any other like directions the conversation didn't go? Would you like to just touch on anything that you wanted to that we didn't bring up?
I don't know. We got to a lot.
I think I really loved this conversation. So
thank you. I'm glad that.
Yeah, no, beautifully informative. Yeah.
Yeah,
I definitely like. I want to go play with schedules. Like I want to go do it. So
yeah, and I would say again, like I just always reiterate it. It's like know what your goal is in your writing, and like always like it's because it's always good to like when you're implementing something new is to ask like, does this serve the goal that I'm trying to achieve? Because like there are like I see a lot of shiny things in the writer world where I'm like, ooh, frayed edges and like special edition covers, and I'm like, I would love that, but I also know that it would like take a lot from me, and I'm like, does that really serve my goal of just like consistently writing stories? Like and I'm like, okay, my goal is actually to just like put more books in the world. Like it would be awesome if they were super pretty, and like maybe a publisher will do that for me one day. And so I'm like, okay, like, or just reevaluate.
Or someday in the future, you'll be like, I'm going to hire a VA and they're going to do this for me.
Exactly.
You know, like that is still something that could come in the future.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's kind of like, and that can even like come to like, new project idea. I really want to start writing this. And it's like, what does that serve your goal of finishing this book by a certain deadline? And so, like, and I'll have those like plot bunnies popping in my head all the time. And usually what I do is I just like, I'll do like voice dictation, and I'll dictate a bunch of notes about it. And I'm like, okay, you won't forget it now, Lauren. You got all those notes and you can work on it in the future. Now go back to the book that served your goal.
I love that. I really like, because especially like if you're listening to a lot of podcasts and like checking things out, like the way people are getting to like what they want, there's so many different paths.
Yeah.
And so just knowing exactly like what you're achieving right now, and like what path you're on, it's really easy to get distracted, but to just keep on putting one foot in front of the other for yourself, sort of thing. So, and it goes back to that whole idea of like, you can do a lot of things, but you can't really finish a lot of things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
like
that's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Lauren, do you want to tell listener where they can find you?
Sure. So yeah, again, I'm Lauren Connolly, and that's the only name that I write under right now. I'm on my website is laurenconnollyromance.com, and that has a list of all my books. I write contemporary romance and paranormal romance. And I've got a lot of audiobooks coming out this year, so I'm pumped about that.
Yay!
Yeah, and then I'm
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, they're like sending me all the files, and I'm like, oh gosh, I gotta listen to all these. So
that's so exciting.
yeah, because I'm a big audiobook listener, so I'm really excited that a lot of my
I am
books
too.
shall be in audio.
Yeah.
And I'm Lauren Connolly romance on like Instagram and TikTok and stuff. So feel free to follow me there.
Another thing that we didn't talk about that I really love is that you write under the same like pen name for both the genres you write in. And like it seems like I don't have your numbers in front of me by any means. I just, see you on Instagram and stuff like that. And it seems like you're navigating that really well. And so every time I'm like, no, that's not your genre, I'm like, well, but Lauren does it. Like, I don't need a whole new pen name. I don't need to like double my work. Like, Lauren does it. I'm sure her readers are fully capable of deciding which book they're going to pick up from her. Right?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
yeah, I've always really loved that you do that.
Thank you. Yeah, it does. It makes some things easier for me. And I don't know, like maybe it some books would sell better, or would I don't know that it like stops my books from selling well.
People from finding you.
Yeah,
mm-hmm.
I think the main thing that I struggle with is whenever someone asks me what my brand is, and I'm like, I don't know. Basically, my books are all written kind of in the same voice and tone, and I've had people like actually pick up each like series, paranormal and contemporary. I actually had one person email me, and they were like, I found these separately, and I liked them both, and I looked up the author and realized they were both by you. And I was like, oh, awesome.
That's hilarious.
So yeah, I'm glad that it's working out for me, but I have to say I did not put like a lot of planning into that. It was mainly that I didn't want to go through all the hassle of setting up another pen name.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then I think also like your covers and everything are very clearly branded for the genre they're in. And we talk all the time about how readers are smart, right?
Yeah.
And so they know what book they're picking up just based on the appearance of it. And like, it's not like they're going to be expecting a contemporary romance and then like fall into a paranormal world. They know from the cover.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a very good
point.
And
so, and then also they're also romance. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's not like you're writing under the same pen name for romance and literary fiction. Right.
Yeah.
Like you're still in the same wheelhouse sort of thing.
Yeah. And I also, in all my books, I include content warnings in like the first, the entry pages. So like basically I would say like the darkness that exists in any of my books is the same level across the board, but I'm also like, oh yeah, you're not going to like read a funny rom-com from me and then be like, murder in another book. So yeah.
Well, that's awesome. So you've given so much advice in this conversation. So if you don't have any more advice to give, that's totally fine. And I did accidentally like switch our placement around for your socials and the advice. But we usually like to end the conversation with a piece of advice if you're able to think of it, right?
Okay.
But if you're not, like, we won't make you. So
a piece of advice. I would say back up all your work. Back it up in multiple places. Have it in the cloud. Email it to yourself. You don't want to spend all your time writing a book and then lose it because of a glitch. So back up your work.
That's very good advice. Yeah. That's very good advice.
Yeah.
So listener, my piece of advice, I don't know. I'm going to take that like 5-minute sprint. I don't know if you're like me right now, listener, and you're just having the hardest time making eye contact with your work, but I'm going to do the 5-minute sprints and I will report back on how well that worked. I'm Marty V. You can find me at martyv.com and at martyvauthor on Instagram and TikTok. And if you do not already follow Lauren, you should, because it is impressive to see all the things you put out and like how well you manage your social media as well. So
thank you. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. Oh my gosh, I really appreciate this so much.
Yeah, I was glad that we could get
so
together.
Yeah, me too. Listener, have a good day. We'll talk to you later. Bye.